Vishal Garbaksani, Sumit Rai, Krishna Subramaniam, and Sunil Verma are the four founders of Mobclix. That's me with them. Mobclix is a mobile ad exchange provider for apps, which has been acquired by Velti, a global mobile marketing agency.
Let me start off by asking, where were you guys born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Long Beach in LA.
Oh.
Yeah, and then grew up in Fremont.
I was born in Los Angeles, and I grew up in Los Angeles. Basically came up north, went to Berkeley, stayed in the Bay Area for a number of years, moved to Boston for a few years, actually lived with Sunil out there, moved to Vegas for a year, kind of lived with Sunil out there too, moved to India in between for a little while, lived with Sunil out there too. There's a pattern here.
Is he like following you?
I think it's the other way around. And then we
can't get away from
ultimately got back here, started Mobclix, and history was made.
I was born and raised in San Francisco,
Oh.
so it was pretty nice. Actually was born near Octavia, near Japantown.
Okay.
So grew up in San Francisco, then went to school out in Santa Clara. That's where I met Sunil. Our freshman year, we hung out, did a lot of South Asian stuff together, computer engineering. Then after that, did consulting, so traveled a lot. So lived in Denver, India, LA, San Diego.
I was born in the Central Valley, near Sacramento, and I grew up in Santa Clara. So, grew up in Santa Clara my whole life. I now live in Fremont with my family, and yeah. Work has taken us to, a lot of different locations, both domestically and international. So I've had a chance to kind of, see both sides of the U.S. as well as spent quite a bit of time in India, just to kind of, not just do business, but also really absorb sort of the culture and, just understand, the whole East-West and kind of how do we kind of meld that together for future generations. No, I think I was pretty fortunate where we did a lot of yearly trips to back home. So, everything from spending time in Punjab, where my parents are from, to the big tier one cities like Bombay and Delhi. You get an understanding of kind of how to get around and really how to live there. I think one of the biggest problems is logistically you don't really figure out how to get through sort of like normal things. So if I were to try and set up, internet, it could take, anywhere up to like a month or 2 months in India. Whereas here, you have it available for you in 24 hours. So
The first couple of weeks were amazing. Then after that, the traffic definitely got pretty interesting. I think the pace of life is just very different. A lot of the folks that I worked with that lived in Bombay, lived in villages on the outskirts. So every morning they would basically come by bus, and it would take about a 1 to 2 hour commute. So they'd get into the office around 10 a.m. And then around 6 p.m. everyone would leave, but they would actually end up leaving to school because they'd be going to grad school. And then they actually be getting back to their house around 10 o'clock. And they'd do that Monday through Saturday. And then during the day, when people would come in to work around 10 a.m., they would talk for about 20 minutes, then start working at 10:30 in the morning, and then an hour would pass, and then the chaiwala would come, and everyone would basically buy chai, and then an hour would pass, and then everyone would go get lunch for an hour, and then come back, and then you'd work for another 2 hours, and then chai break again. So it's a very social and fun experience.
Yeah.
But I think it's just different when you set the right expectations. It's a different pace, but you can get a lot of stuff done if you're kind of working in that pace.
I think we all grew up in like pretty culturally aware families, and I think we all speak like various Indian languages, and so I think it was pretty easy for us to go out there, and we've all traveled there throughout our lives multiple times, so it wasn't a shock or anything new to us.
Yeah.
On the internet, there was one experience, I think, Sunil, you might remember this, where we went to the Intercontinental in Delhi, and our Wi-Fi wasn't working. And basically, we called down for tech support. We're like, our Wi-Fi is not working. So this tech comes up and he like plays with the computer for like 5 minutes. He's like, I don't know what's going on. So he's like, let me go outside and see if I could fix this. And we're kind of like, what's he gonna do outside? And so our window was open, and we're looking outside, and there's this antenna outside the hotel which receives internet for the entire building. And he sort of starts turning the antenna to point it into our room. And he's kind of like. We're like, yeah, it's working. So we just stopped the antenna, pointed right to our room, and we had Wi-Fi.
So it probably stopped working for everybody else.
Probably, but we were very productive.
A lot of the stuff that Sunil had mentioned, right? Just the things that you take for granted here, like renting space, getting AC, getting internet. getting the right talent and making sure they show up at work every day.
Yeah.
Right? Things like that you just sort of take for granted, right? When you give someone a job, you expect them to come to work. In India, you give them a job, it doesn't mean they're going to show up every day, right? And so it's figuring out how to do things and not get frustrated with sort of culture and society there, and figuring out how to work with it.
So while growing up, did you guys always know that entrepreneurship was something that you wanted to get into?
Growing up, coming from an Indian family, right, it was always be a doctor, be an engineer, be a lawyer, whatever it was. So all through high school, all through college, I was, pre-med, doing research at the UC Davis Med Center, doing interning at the veterinary hospitals out there, and basically building the career path towards medical school. I basically wanted to become an orthopedic surgeon and was going through that path. After I graduated from Davis, I was planning on going to Davis for med school. I took a year off in between. I went out to New York, and I was doing research at the New York Academy of Medicine. So living out there in New York, living on a stipend, it was difficult to sort of make ends meet in terms of paying rent, going out, grabbing dinner, things like that, and at the same time, sort of managing that lifestyle. Didn't really want to ask my parents for money, so I felt like I should be supporting myself at that point. And so I ended up just picking up odd jobs off places like Craigslist, and building websites, building flyers, building little projects, making invitations for Vishal's birthday parties that he had, and to sort of and I got really interested in the internet and things of that sort. I started going to research during the day, staying up all night working on these things, and then I would start skipping research and just working all night and day, and then started hiring a few people in India, got burnt a couple times and things like that, but ended up learning a lot, and that was where we started Burp, and that was off a trip that I had gone to India, and with a bunch of friends, and it was the first time I'd went to India with friends. Usually my trips have been with family, and so you go there, you go visit every uncle and aunt you have, you eat 10 times a day, and then you come back, pass out, wake up, do it again, right? And so this trip was the first time I'd gone with friends from different parts of India. We traveled all around from Delhi, Bombay, Goa, Rajasthan, etc. And so when we were traveling around, realized, well, hey, it's really hard to figure out what restaurants, hotels, coffee shops, juice bars, whatever it is, there are, and how do you find a place to, there was nothing out there that organized the content in an easy and accessible way. It was literally, you'd ask people and they say, go down the street, make a right out the tree, things of that sort, and that was sort of the first entryway into moving away from med school.
How did your parents take that?
They said great, and they gave me a high five and said, "You're on your own." No, just kidding. No, it was probably the hardest conversation I had to have, right? Because it was literally, med school. Well, hey, I'm gonna put that on hold. I'm gonna start a company up with a guy I don't really know in a space I'm not really that familiar with, but I have this gut feeling, and that was the initial conversation. So it was definitely pretty rough, and I think, luckily things worked out. Otherwise, I'd be back in school.
Well, I knew I wanted to start a company or a business at some point, and I think I think my aha moment was actually in college, when my first summer after freshman year, I actually taught martial arts, and I was making like $50 an hour, which was a lot of money for me at that time. And then my second summer after sophomore year, I was like, I should get a real job, and so I went and got this software R&D position doing software engineering at Citibank, which just sucked. And I was making like $18 an hour, and I was like, last summer I was jumping around my pajamas making 3 times as much money. This doesn't work for me. And so I went back to school, and I was like, I need to do something different. And so that was sort of where I was like, I think I need to start something and get out on my own. And that's actually what drove me into venture capital, to really learn how to start a business and company.
Oh,
He's been an entrepreneur for quite a while, right? Started when you were 8.
When you were 8?
Yeah, so I started my first. Thanks, Danielle. No, so I actually started my first little business when I was 8. And like I said, I liked martial arts my entire life. So, and I also liked origami when I was a kid. So I used to make these little ninja stars. And I used to make these 4-pointed stars. And I used to make these rings, which would convert transformably into 8-pointed stars, much like this couch. And so I would sell these little ninja stars, which were 4 points for like 25 cents, and I'd sell the rings all the way up to $8, depending on the size, the construction, the color paper, the foil, whatever. And so it was going really well. I was actually making like $30-40 a week as an 8-year-old, which was a lot of money for ice cream, pizza, and soda. And so, it kept going really well, and then I had some friends in the neighborhood that caught wind of it, and they went to a different elementary school, and they wanted to start selling it, so they started selling it through me, and so business started growing, and eventually got to a point where I was like, I should get a partner, and so I knew this kid, Daniel Hong, and Chinese background, and I said, hey, I'll teach you how to make this stuff. Why don't we go into business together? And so I taught him how to make it. It went really well. We started growing, and then I started deciding, what do we do with all this money? And so we started learning a little bit about marketing. So every Friday we decided to throw a party where we'd invite like all our friends, and it'd be like free pizza, free soda, free ice cream for like all our buddies. And everyone wanted to kind of come to this party after a little while. And so people would come up and ask, can I come to your party? And so we started a little marketing campaign where if anyone bought a product from us that week, they could basically come to our party. Wow. So I had 8-year-old girls coming up to me buying ninja stars. And they didn't know it's the ninja stars, but they wanted to go to this thing on Friday. And so it kept growing. Eventually, Daniel, I think, got smart, and after 3-4 months decided to break apart and start competing with me. So we started learning our first lessons of business at a young age. And so I wanted to put him out of business after he did that. So I cut all my prices down to a penny, and successfully put him out of business, but didn't realize as a child that I repriced the entire market, and nobody would buy anything for me going forward for more than a penny. And so they'd be like, Joe got it for a penny last week, why do I have to pay $3? And learned the value of intellectual property. As many people in software have learned, have to be careful with the Chinese with intellectual property. And that was the first business. It was fun.
What did your parents think about this?
They didn't know. But my mom did find a stash of cash, because these are kids, right? They're all like ones. They weren't like $100 bills. So it was a stash of hundreds, which I don't know why, but I put under their television in the master bedroom. And because I used to watch cartoons there at like 5 in the morning. And so I had this huge stash of cash. My mom's cleaning up, and there's like all this money underneath this, like hundreds of dollars, right, under this television. She yells my name. She's like, come up here. She's like, what is this? I was like, I don't know. Why do you keep your money under the TV?
No, I think all of us have a different story. I mean, when for me, my first business venture actually was in middle school in 7th grade. Started BBS. It's basically this thing where people can actually log into, and it was before like people even had the internet. You'd kind of have a 4 and 5 number in San Francisco, and you actually dial in. And I realized that people would actually dial in and spend anywhere from like 30 minutes to 5 hours actually on playing text-based games. There was a thing called like Lord of the Red. It was like LOT. Anyway, so there's all these text-based games that people were actually playing online, and I found that people wouldn't mind actually almost doing as a pay-as-you-go model. In-app purchasing was actually there back 15, 16 years ago, but it was all done on dial-up modems. What I didn't realize, however, is that there was a lot of counterfeit going on online, where when you basically give people your credit card number, back then actually you didn't validate it. You would just put an algorithm by a credit card number, and be like, okay, that's a legit Visa number, or that's a legit American Express number, and then you'd batch the charges every week. And what happened is when I would batch my charges every week, 10% or 5% of those charges would actually be real. The rest of them would just be actually literally fake numbers. And there's no way of solving that problem. Again, now of course it's a different story. But that kind of taught me the whole model of how I actually can make money from this thing. So it got to a point where it was making money and it was able to pay for itself, but it never went beyond that, purely because it was essentially a fraud. And how do you actually know what type of users to do? So that kind of died along in 8th grade. And then when I went to high school, I really wanted to get a CD burner, right? Those are like kind of like the big thing. And back then, it was a quarter speed, and it was like $400 or $500. So begged the parents, they got it for me, and people then got wind of that. So then they would actually give me all their CDs, and they would pay me to make basically mix CDs.
Oh.
And over time, this was before MP3s, I would actually mix them, and they would be basically created big WAV files. So every track would be a WAV file. And over time, I actually amassed this huge collection of music, not only because I was making them mix CDs, and now people then were coming to me to actually ask me, hey, can you make me a CD? And I would basically charge $1 per track. And you could have, at that time, it was 74-minute CDs. So the cost for my burner or CD-ROM, the CD burner came back to me in a couple of weeks. And then after that, my music collection always stayed current as well. So it was kind of a win-win. It was a win-win for everyone. And then after high school, I think by the time I graduated, everyone had a CD burner, so it wasn't as exciting. But it was exciting is that in science class, I'll never forget this, you used to get extra credit for doing a dictionary, like definitions of words. And the teacher would basically give us like 30 words. Like, if you guys can define this, you guys get extra credit. I literally just wrote a script that basically put the 30 words onto an online encyclopedia. And I would basically, every Friday, just give my teacher a report of all the words definitions. And he'd be like, where's this from? I'm like, I stayed up all night writing this. But at that time, people just didn't understand how easy it was. So there's just a lot of cool things you can just see in technology and how it affects things. And then in college, Sina and I, we did the same major together. And then we were basically pretty much entrepreneurs all the time. We always talked to our teachers. We always tried to figure out different ways of doing things. We met our networking teacher. We drove down to Santa Cruz a bunch of times to figure out what we could do on the networking stack. And then we got the first kind of big aha moment, if you will, is our senior design. So Sunil, myself, and another one of our friends, Alan, the three of us basically worked on a firewall project. We basically created this thing called LFMS. And we basically wanted to help make colleges more secure, because we realized that hackers are everywhere. You're going to hack into your system, whether it be a business or education. The problem is those schools have a very tough time paying for that type of equipment, and thereby also the software. So we basically designed essentially an open source and free way of schools basically securing their software. So we did that for over 1 year. It was a senior design project, and then we ended up winning for our entire class. Wow. So and unfortunately, though, we graduated in 2002. So we had judges from like Nortel and Cisco, and they literally told us, if it wasn't for this economy right now, we'd have funded your idea. So we got kind of our first wind of how like investments works, and also I think more importantly how timing works too, right? Because timing is critical to having things being successful.
Yeah, no, I think Michelle covered a lot of similar trajectories that I had as well. Definitely in middle school had a BBS as well. We had I think 15 or 20 modems set up at that time, and weren't really making a lot of money, but we were having a lot of fun until the phone bill came, and our parents were like, "What the heck is going on?" And I think one of the things is I come from like a family of entrepreneurs as well, so got sort of thrown into that at a very early age. Did a lot of retail, got to understand sort of the benefits of learning how to properly haggle with South Asian customers. So that kind of really gave me a leg up very, very quickly. And then, during college, worked at, places like Cisco and Altera and whatnot. And you start to realize that no matter how much effort you're kind of putting in, it's a very small piece in a very big, in a big pie, and you're not really moving the needle on anything. So realized very early on that, engineering and everything is great, but at the same time, I want to be in a place where I can actually make a big change. And how do I actually go about that, opportunity? Like Vishal mentioned, we had almost every single class together for 5 years for one or two. So it's we saw quite a bit of each other and got to throw around lots of ideas. And then at that time as well, I had snuck into a investment banking conference. Actually, I got wind of this. I was still wrapping up school and whatnot, but so I threw a suit on, came up to San Francisco. That's actually where I met Sumit at this Robbie Stevens conference. And this is Robbie Stevens, like back in the day, was like a huge bank, right, investment bank, and they had a extremely opulent conference. And I was like walking around and I was like amazed, right? I was like, how do I get into this? Because tech conferences are not like this at all, right? I ended up talking to Sumit a couple times, and Sumit actually, ended up becoming my mentor and helping me out in terms of how to actually get on the path of being, a lot more influential in a company's life cycle. So, started looking at things like, venture capital and investment banking. After school, ended up working at a couple of different, product manager jobs, then jumped into investment banking, then ended up going into venture. So, and along the way, we were always kind of either looking at new opportunities or talking about new opportunities, or just kind of trying to figure out, what can we do on our own that will be a lot more influential, not only sort of for the customer base, but, also just an opportunity to work together. I think that's kind of what was always a driving factor as well.
How did you guys meet Krishna?
So Krishna as well. Because we all were in school at the same time, we all sort of participated in the same, cultural events and whatnot. So we met. I think the first time we met Krishna was at a culture show, and we were doing Hindi film dance. So I think that's our first little time.
Dance as well?
Yeah, of course.
All of you guys?
Some people still dance.
Yeah, no, exactly. Vishal is still our resident dancer. He's looking to top hat around. So. And then from there, sort of had a similar group of friends, and then just stayed in touch throughout the times. And as he was kind of going down his entrepreneurship route, we were all kind of always keeping in touch, as well as kind of seeing if there were opportunities to work together. So when I was a venture capitalist, I was looking at his companies, and we were trying to see there's something that makes sense. And just really just kept in touch and had common friends, and we're just keep doing that thing, and all of a sudden it worked out.
So how did Mobclix start?
It happened in 2008. All four of us. So we always kind of brainstorm different ideas from each other. Sumit might have something, or Krishna might have an interesting idea, or Sunil. We would always just kind of talk amongst each other and just kind of put stuff on the wall and see what would stick. And
You guys knew the four of you wanted to collaborate and start something together.
well, we would just kind of have more passive conversations. I think all of us were doing different things in our career, but we'd always just be kind of talking, right? It could be a conversation Sunil and Krishna could have about something interesting, or Sumit and Sunil, or myself and someone else, and we'd just always be talking about stuff, right? And because we'd always want to be entrepreneurial, and we'd always want to be impactful, right? And then hopefully then generate value from that, right? So Sunil and I would have our brainstorm session that we would normally do, and we basically I basically told him, I'm looking, I've been working with Apple on the iPhone and on the actual App Store experience for enterprise. And I'm like, this thing is going to be amazing. Like, we have to do something in this space. And then at that time, I remember Sunil then basically called up Sumit and Krishna. And then when we actually asked Krishna, I'm like, what do you think our name should be? And we had all these random names on the wall. And then Krishna was like, well, Mobclix. And we literally just registered that day and all the different types of versions of that, and then we just started kind of building momentum. I think what was really interesting, about the four of us, that we all brought such unique skills to the table that when we're all on the same page, it just accelerates, and it makes us pretty much an unstoppable force, because we're able to just keep on pushing on more and more momentum, and we also feed off of each other's energy. So it kind of just there'll be one time where Krishna will send you an email at 4 a.m. Sunil responds to it at 4:30. I'll respond to it, and Sumit will respond, and you're like, none of us ever sleep, but we're all kind of taking our own little, as Krishna does, micro naps. But I think the whole thing when we saw in 2008 was we placed a big bet. We felt that the iPhone was going to change the game. It did, and then we basically were able to launch a product completely under the table. And I think some of the big things was also in terms of how we created the business, how we operated the business. I think everyone kind of brought such unique skills in terms of the brand, how we actually built the brand up, how we actually laid out the investment strategy, and then we're able to actually even get funding, and what does that even mean? And then how Sunil was able to also build all of us together and operate a business too. So it was such a good balance of skills that it's very rare to have alone, and then also even more rare to actually have the right timing at the right place. When you fast forward 3-4 years later, it's like a $80 billion market that didn't exist in 2008.
You guys didn't take any VC funding and basically maxed out your credit cards. Is that true? And is that something you guys would recommend?
I think everyone's risk profile is different. I think, in our case, because we did have the team that we had, and we had a lot of support from each other. And like, Vishal said, we did feed off each other's energy. We had a lot of confidence that we were going to make it. And so I think our tolerance to take a little additional risk, but in exchange for that, retain more control and more equity was higher. And so in our case, we funded it ourselves, we built it out. We did take a little bit of angel financing at one point, and venture debt, and we certainly had several opportunities to take venture capital. But we just decided that, when we did the math around the time and the dilution, it just made more sense for us, because we also had exit opportunities at the same time to, actually exit the company than to go down the venture path.
Okay.
But
So, what are some things that you look for while acquiring a company?
okay, well, what are some things you look for? I mean, you look for a lot of things. I mean, it really depends on what the objective is of the acquisition. The acquisitions are done for different reasons. Sometimes they're done for purely financial reasons, where you just want to add additional profit and cash flow to your company. At that point, you're obviously looking at, net income, profit, EBITDA, those types of financial metrics. Acquisitions are also done for strategic reasons. And, if that's the case, then you're looking at what's the value strategically of that asset, what synergies does it bring to your business, how is it going to help you grow, are you going to gain more market share? And sometimes acquisitions are done for talent. And, at that time, I think that, you look at the team and you look at the people on the team and see if these are people that you want as a part of your company to help it grow. At Mobclix, we did do a small acquisition ourselves, actually. We brought in some really great talent. They added a lot of value. They were really, really talented on the mobile side, and that really drove the company as well.
Any advice you guys can give aspiring entrepreneurs?
Yes. So in terms of advice, right? I think make sure do something that you really love, and do it for that particular reason. Don't do it for money. Right? I think a lot of times people go out and try to do things because they want the money, they want the fame, they want everything that comes with it, and you're so focused on that you completely lose sight of what you're actually building or what you're trying to solve for. So if you can solve real problems for real people, then you'll end up, everything else will just be secondary, and money will come, and the success will come. But you have to love what you're doing and really look at solving a specific problem.
Well, thank you guys so much for being part of this.
You're gonna get a lot more violence in the room.